All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting daily vlog. This is Daily Vlog 2025, number 102, and today I am going to make some enemies because I have seen an insult to the idea of business that just really rubbed me the wrong way. And I'm going to be naming names, not because I think this person deserves to be called out. I'm going to put this disclaimer right at the front. This is not meant for you guys to go over and tell this particular creator, you're stupid, you don't know how to run a business. That's not the point of this. Do not contact them. Do not. However, the information that I have to refute here is so specific that I can't refute it without specifically saying where I'm getting these numbers from. All right. So, if anyone remembers, like 2 days ago, made a video talking about what we can learn from a failed Kickstarter. And I did everything I could to kind of avoid naming what the Kickstarter was. Can't do that anymore because the person that did it, the DM Layer, is their YouTube channel. I don't know the guy's name, but did this really long live stream explaining why everything didn't work. And effectively, he used some really, really bad math, used an extremely common justification that I used to see in sales all the time, which is basically, for lack of a better term, all salesmen lie, which isn't true. And there've been actual studies that show that the number of dishonest salesmen that exist are an extremely tiny minority. However, bad salesmen would always use that to kind of justify why their sales are bad. Well, the reason that I'm not hitting my sales goal is everyone else just lies to the customer, and I'm the only truthful one, so that's why. And that's effectively one of the arguments that this particular creator used to justify why they were going to lose shit tons of money on this Kickstarter. Now, I'm going to say this up front. 100% they were going to lose a shit ton of money on this Kickstarter. Their justification is, well, it's all the terrorists' fault and it's Kickstarter's fault. It's, no, 100% the reason they were going to lose all of this money on this Kickstarter is because they made a lot of really, really stupid business decisions and ignored a lot of other aspects of business that would have helped them recoup that loss. And again, this all comes back to the idea that if you're going to get into business, you need to learn how businesses work, specifically your kind of business. Like, if you're going to be a professional dungeon master, then you need to figure out how professional dungeon mastering works. Not this kind of pie in the sky, well, if I just put the games up, then people will just pay me to do the thing that I'm already doing and I will make some money. It's not how professional dungeon mastering works. You actually have to look into, okay, well, this is how I advertise my games, and this is how much time I have to spend doing this aspect, and this is how I pay my taxes, and you have to learn how the actual market works. And for the DM Layer, they've done a bunch of successful Kickstarters. We'll talk about those in a second here, with just how bizarre the numbers they just kind of pulled out of their ass were. They've done successful Kickstarters, but they've done them entirely for tabletop RPG books. And now they wanted to do a board game. And the board game market, despite the fact that a lot of people will group TTRPG players and board game players into the same group, the markets themselves are completely different. For a book, you have a completely different set of costs that you have to deal with, including how you get it to distributors, the best ways to do that. Whereas with a board game, you have to have suppliers, you have to have warehouses to space. It's such a different process. And because of that, and because of their just complete inability to understand how to run a successful startup effectively, they fucked themselves over. And it looks like their actual like entire business is in a really bad financial situation. I'm not saying that they're going to close shop or anything like that, because again, a smart business person can turn this around really, really quickly. I am going to say I did not watch 100% of the video because I just got so tilted watching it. And again, I have heard these excuses over and over and over again. So there's a very, very good chance that I may have missed something where they provide a better explanation for these things. But all the things that I'm going to be refuting here are things that they actually said in the video, and they're 100% complete bonkers wrong. Again, this is a salesman that has been called into the manager's office going, hey, you're not making your sales numbers, what's up? And their response is, it's everybody else's fault but mine. It's not how it works. It's never how it works. Some of the things that they're complaining about are things that are out of their control, specifically the tariffs. They have no control over that. But as I said in my last video, everybody knew the tariffs were coming. And everybody knew they were going to be targeting China. So being like complete surprise Pikachu face that they levied massive tariffs on China, sorry, that's just not how good business works. If you know that there's a particular market or a distributor that's going to, their pricing is going to become extremely volatile, you don't work with that manufacturer. So, yeah, sorry, no, you don't get to go, that's the tariffs, it's all the tariffs' fault. No, sorry. So, I'm just gonna go over. I literally wrote down a few things just so I could remember them, because again, Swiss cheese memory. So the first thing I wrote down, because this is at the very, very beginning of this video, funding goals are all lies. Nope. So what does he mean by this? So he talked about it in his other video where he was talking about how he's going to cancel it, because what happened with this board game is called, I think, Dungeon Drifters is the name of the board game. It had an initial funding goal of $10,000, and it hit that when he canceled when he canceled the Kickstarter campaign. He had a little over 40, I think it's like $41,000 or $42,000, and over 300 backers. So he hit his goal. How are you going to lose money? You hit your goal. He said, well, all funding goals are lies. That's not the real number. In order for me to actually make profit, I would have had to sell this money. But if I actually put that number there, no one will back it because people won't back big projects. None of that is true. However, there are some truths that have been misinterpreted to come to that resolution. There are quite a few companies that look at Kickstarters, and there's been a lot of research into how to do a profitable Kickstarter. And there is some truth to the idea that if you set your goals too high, people won't back it, because people are less willing to back a product that they don't think is going to hit their good goal. And there have been case studies, effectively, that have shown that having a slightly lower goal will actually earn you more money, because once it's funded, more people get excited about it, because it's basically guaranteed I'm going to get this in their mind. Versus before it's funded, it's, well, I don't know if this is going to be a thing. Now, the interesting thing about crowdfunding in general is if it's not funded, then nobody pays anything. So there is this kind of weird psychological dichotomy going on, where people are always like, well, if I invest in this and it doesn't reach its goal, then, you know, I'm not getting anything out of it. But you're also not paying anything for it. So there's really no risk for the Kickstarter backers if the project isn't funded. all the risk for the Kickstarter backers go into effect when the project is funded. So technically, you should be more worried about funding a fully funded Kickstarter than you should be for one that doesn't look like it's going to hit its goals as a Kickstarter backer. But that's not how it works. Our brains don't work that way. One of my favorite experiments that I actually studied in college for my business degree had to do with pricing, and specifically pricing displays. This particular study has been redone over and over and over again, which for anyone that doesn't understand experimental design, that's actually one of the core components of a well-designed experiment. A well-designed experiment should be measurable. Like if you're doing an experiment about, well, what makes you feel better? That's really, really hard to be able to measure and quantify. So a good scientific experiment must be measurable and quantifiable and must be repeatable. If you can't repeat the experiment, then it's a bad experiment because theoretically you could have it could be a fluke, it could be an outlier. And by repeating the experiment multiple times in multiple locations, that's when we get actual good science. So this particular experiment has been repeated dozens of times, maybe hundreds of times, because it is by far one of the easiest experiments that you can set up. And if you really wanted to, you could run this experiment yourself. It's absolutely fascinating. The way the experiment works is they put a bunch of objects in a room. And they get a bunch of volunteers, and then next to each object, they put a random string of numbers next to it. And then they have the people walk in, and the only thing that they have to do is they have to roughly estimate how valuable each object is. They write it down, they give it, and they go away. And the best way to do this particular experiment is... first of all, you have to know the actual value of each of the objects before you do it. Second of all, run it in multiple groups. And every time you put a new group in, you flip around the tags. You just randomly mix them up. What they have found over and over and over again running this experiment is anytime there is a set of numbers next to an item that was bigger, people overvalued their estimation of what it was. Now, again, this particular experiment, nothing is ever said to the people about the numbers next to them. They don't mention them. They don't say anything. They simply go, hey, come in and we want you to guess the value of these items. And they never mention the numbers whatsoever. There's nothing on the numbers themselves that indicate they're any way associated with these items other than physical proximity. That's the only thing there. And every single time, the items with the bigger number next to them are always perceived to be more valuable, more expensive. So our strange brain oftentimes will contradict itself because it likes to create correlations where there aren't any. The particular term of that is called spurious correlation. And it's basically where we just see two things that are correlated, meaning they kind of react with each other. But here's another thing that a lot of people completely forget about science. Correlation does not imply causation. A lot of people will misquote that and say correlation doesn't prove causation. And use that to justify, well, it doesn't prove it, but it does, does kind of imply. Nope, correlation doesn't imply causation. So just because two things kind of look the same when you put them on a graph doesn't mean they're in any way connected whatsoever. But our brains will connect them anyway. So anyway, going back to this whole funding goals are a lie thing. Again, there is data to support the idea that if you set your funding goal too high, you will actually make less money. For doing nothing else, just literally changing the funding goal number will affect how much money you make. And it's not pushing it higher that makes you more money. It's actually pushing it lower. So, well, that means that he's totally right. All funding goals are lies. No. And this is where I'm going to go back to my new favorite people in the world, Stone Mayer Games. if you watch my previous video, I talked about the idea that I started trying to look into the actual market because, again, I have never existed in the board game manufacturing market. I worked in retail, and because of that, I did have a pretty good idea of the retail side of board games and game shops and stuff like that because I had friends that ran game stores. I was heavily involved in them. And again, I ran my own stores. They weren't game stores. I ran office supplies and for a little while I worked for Goodwill. So but retail is retail is retail is retail. It's just understanding the different margins and the different ways that you deal with a lot of different things, to be perfectly honest. So I understood that part, but I didn't understand the actual manufacturing part. So I started looking, found this thing, Stonemaier Games. Stonemaier Games makes a bunch of different board games. They've won a bunch of different awards. They're an extremely profitable company, and they do Kickstarters all the time, and they have a blog. It is probably the greatest blog I have ever seen. It is I'm just gonna go back to the main page to just talk about it because it's just great. So if you go to Stonemaier Games, you'll see all the different board games that they sell, and they're really cool. Like Takedo is the only board game that I recognize because they played it on tabletop years ago. But the rest of them just look amazing, and they look like they're super, super fun. And obviously, this company's doing very, very well. Well, at the very top, you see these things. You see shop, about, news, and then there's something called blog. And they have a bunch of blogs, but one of the things they have, when you motion over it, you can see all these different subtopics. One of the topics is crowdfunding. One of the topics is entrepreneurship and marketing. And then they have a specific one, how to design a tabletop game. This is unbelievably valuable market information that normally the only way that you could get this information is either you would have to intern with a company, which isn't nearly as simple as it sounds. A lot of people don't realize there are quite a few different federal laws that govern how internships work. And probably the biggest limiter on how internships work is in order for it to be considered an internship, you have to actually partner with an education facility. You have to partner with a college or a university or something, and they have to be able to get college credit for it. If they're not doing that, it's not an internship. And it's illegal, and it can actually get you fined and a lot of other things because you're literally violating labor laws. So normally to get all this information, you would have to intern with some company like this and hope that they treat you well. Internships are an absolutely fantastic way to get valuable experience in a field, but it does rely on the company that you're interning at to actually treat you well and actually train you well. There are some internships that just simply aren't worth the time and effort that go into them, and it's really, really hard to figure out which ones are going to be valuable and which ones aren't going to be valuable. You basically have to kind of rely on your school and the company itself to both really do their due diligence. However, Stonemaier Games just gives all this information out, and it's unbelievably excellent information. It's written in a very conversational style, so you don't need to be like a business major like me to be able to understand it. But then they also use a lot of data and spreadsheets and the things like that so that you actually can use it as a business resource. Why am I talking about Stonemaier Games when I'm talking about funding goals or lies? Well, they have a particular article called Kickstarter Lesson 7, The Funding Goal, where they talk about how to come up with your funding goal. And they show all the numbers in a very similar way that the DM layer does it, but then they also explain how to get at your quote-unquote true funding goal. And I'm going to just read this. So the number that they come up with for this is how much it's going to cost me to produce this particular board game is $39,000. That's what their numbers came in. This is Stone Mayer Games. That's what their numbers came up. So I'm just going to read you this paragraph after that. Now, does this mean that you should set your funding goal at 39K? Definitely not. A goal that high will ward away some backers. So this is where you need to start considering how much you're personally willing to invest, and you can hope that you'll be able to sell some of the mass market versions of the game. In this case, if you personally invest $5,000 and you sell 300 of the mass market games at $20 each to a distributor who will get a 60% discount, then your optimistic funding goal will be $28,431. Round down to 25,000, like we did with viticulture. The risk is up to you. So that's how you come up with your actual funding goal, which is not what the DM layer is. The DM layer claimed that he spent $50,000 before anything started, which we'll get back to that number in a little bit. It's ludicrous. And then he just arbitrarily chose $10,000 because that was a number he thought he could achieve quickly. That's not how you do this. Again, Stone Mayer Games has done this over and over and over and over. They are an absolute expert in this. And they specifically say, okay, how much are you willing to invest yourself? Which still means at the end of the Kickstarter, if you hit your goal, you should be able to fund this. And they specifically talk about mass marketing games. It's something that DM Layer, at least in the portion that I talked about, when I went through the comments, a few people brought up this point as well. Didn't to talk about when we're talking about minimum orders. We'll get to that in a second here. So what the DM layer did was picked an arbitrary number that they thought that they could raise, instead of actually going, okay, well, if I already have $50,000 invested in this, bare minimum we have to hit 50,000. But I'm willing to kind of throw away, let's say, 10,000 of that. I'm willing to say that 10,000 was my own personal investment, so I'm only looking to recoup 40,000. Now we need to figure out all the other stuff. So now our new funding goal is this much. That's how it's supposed to work. And there are definite benefits to doing it that way. Because again, if you get up to, if you don't hit your funding goal, nobody gets charged and you have no legal obligation to, actually do anything. You never got any money. You're not really out anything except for the kind of marketing and stuff that you did for pre-production, which again was ludicrous, the amount of money that he's spent, especially since he didn't have that kind of money to spend on it. We'll get to that in a second. So that in and of itself is nice. The other problem with lowballing it so far, especially if you lowball it by that much and then actually get money for it. One of the fun aspects about Kickstarter that most people should be aware of, but I think a lot of people just casually forget this part. You sign a disclaimer when you back something stating specifically Kickstarter is not responsible for them not fulfilling anything, and you understand that even if you give them money, you may never get anything out of it. So there is a disclaimer already in there that you legally, digitally sign that prevents some lawsuits from happening against Kickstarters that don't finish their fulfillment. There's actually a story recently where some dice manufacturing person, he is a very, very small company, apparently has run multiple Kickstarters where he just simply doesn't fulfill the orders, and he actually got to taken to court for it and lost the case, and nothing has still happened because that's a civil matter, not a criminal matter. So he's not a criminal or anything. He just has some civil fines that he hasn't paid yet in a different state than he resides in. So with stuff like that, it's extremely complicated. However, something that can change from civil to criminal is if the company is accused of fraud. Proving fraud is unbelievably difficult because what you have to do is you have to prove that they had no intention of ever fulfilling that stuff, that they lied blatantly with the express purpose of taking your money and running with it. If you can prove that, which is a very, very high bar, then you can actually get them into criminal court, which is significantly more difficult to weasel your way out of. Civil fines and stuff like that, there's a lot of different ways to kind of weasel your way out of them. And depending on the fines themselves, I think some of them can actually even go away through bankruptcy and other kind of debt refinancing style things. Criminal fines and stuff like that don't go away with bankruptcy and are significantly more difficult. And they can actually land you in jail. The other thing that can happen with criminal fines is they can actually liquidate your assets in order to pay them. So the court can actually basically take all your stuff, sell it, and then give people money, and then just say, well, "Fuck you! You committed a crime." So how would you prove that they intentionally had never that they had no interest in ever fulfilling this, and that they were doing this just to take your money? I'm not a lawyer. This is not legal advice. This is just a theory that I have. Well, if you were to bring up in court that their funding goal was so low that there was no possible way that they could have ever fulfilled it at that particular funding goal, that would be a really, really good bit of information to prove that it was fraud. Now, am I saying that 100% would happen, could happen? Absolutely not. I am not a lawyer. I have never practiced law, anything like that. However, were I in a situation where I needed to file a lawsuit like that, that would be the first place I would go. Is like, their funding goal was obviously too low for the amount of money that they spent. It was obvious that their intent was to just get the money and then go, because there was no possible way they could have fulfilled that. So it's not even an intent or not. You just would have to look at the numbers and go, yeah, it wasn't possible for them to fulfill it. Therefore, it had to be fraud, because what they were doing was impossible by their own definition. So the idea of all funding goes to lies, no, that's a fantastic way to get yourself sued for fraud. Congratulations, you have made the first mistake. Again, we go to Stone Mayer Games, and they give a really simple, easy to understand way to figure out what your funding goal should be. And part of their explanation hinges on the idea of, remember, if you hit your goal, you have to do this. So if you lowball it, understand what you are agreeing to by lowballing it is that I am going to invest more money, not I am going to cancel it because I didn't get the real amount of money that I need. So the first thing, funding goals are lies, is in itself a lie. Again, this is the exact same excuse I heard over and over and over and over again when I was working in sales and management. And it was basically just, well, it's not my fault. It's that I'm the good person and everyone else is bad. Nope, sorry, you're the bad person. The next fun fact that they put in, they talked about the tariffs in China, and they specifically said all manufacturers are in China. Bold-faced lie. I researched for 10, 15, specifically looking for manufacturers. I think I spent like 10, 15 minutes on it. And I found the majority of manufacturers are in China. Not all of them. There was a couple in the UK, which is not dealing with 140% to the tariffs right now. They're still getting tariffed, just nowhere near as high. And actually, the tariffs that DM Layer was looking at was actually 50% to tariffs, because that was the last time he checked. That's what he thought the tariffs were going to be. So if he had used a UK-based manufacturer, the tariffs against the UK are in like the 10s or 20%. Like, they're really, really small compared to that. So There are UK based manufacturers that could have done this. There are also Korean based manufacturers, which again, Korea, South Korea specifically, not North Korea. We don't we don't talk about them. But South Korea is also dealing with tariffs, but they have already showed interest in sitting down at the negotiation table. And every other country that's done that, the result has been 0 for 0 tariffs. And again, Samsung has already said that they're going to be building a plant here in the U.S. to get around some of the tariffs and stuff like that, and to invest in the U.S. economy, which is a Korean-based company. So the Korean businesses are already on the side of the U.S. in this, and so I sincerely doubt that South Korea is going to go too far with this. So the idea that no, all the manufacturers in China, that's the only is just a bold-faced lie. It's not a real thing. There are other manufacturers. However, the cheapest and the easiest to find are all in China. Now, I'll bring back Stonemaier Games. They have mentioned in one of their posts that I haven't been able to find again because there's lots of them. Again, this is such an incredible resource. If you're getting into independent board game stuff, you owe it to yourself to go to Stonemaier Games and look at all the information they have there, because it's bonkers how much stuff they got there. Going back. They specifically mention working with a Chinese manufacturer and what a great relationship they have had with them. So I'm not saying that all Chinese manufacturers are bad. Oh, not saying that. I'm saying the idea of all manufacturers are in China is a bold-faced lie. There are plenty of manufacturers in other countries. They're just more difficult to find, and they actually require some work. What I'm going to assume, this is an assumption on my part, is they look for a manufacturer that had decent reviews, and they just picked the first one they had and started talking to them. Congratulations, you've just made another huge business mistake. The way that any other business that exists works when you're looking for a manufacturer for a particular part is you look for the various manufacturers and you contact a few that you're like, these look promising. And then you start negotiations. Hey, I'd like to get this. I need this many units. What can you do for me? Well, we can do this, and this. You go, okay, I'll get back to you on that. Then you talk to another person. Once you've talked to a pretty big group and you've seen what they've all quoted you, then you go back to the ones that you kind of like and go, hey, I'd really like to work with you, but this other company has quoted me this. Is there any way that we can kind of negotiate this? Are there other aspects? If, maybe we could do an advertising to trade where in my box artwork, I'll have links to your website for things like that or something. Like, there's so many different ways that you can get additional discounts that I am assuming here. I do not know, but based on all the statements that he has made thus far, I can only assume that he doesn't understand how this works. He probably never went down any of those avenues and just went, oh, just like most people will do when they're looking for something like this. They'll go into the store, they'll look at the price on the shelf and go, oh, that must be the only thing they can do. Because in the US, that's generally how it works. Haggling and negotiation is not something that happens in retail. And that's pretty true amongst most of the developed world. Retail in and of itself has been standardized a lot. And there's a lot of psychology that goes into it. One of these days, maybe I'll make a video about customer pathing and the psychology behind planogram design, because that in and of itself is absolutely fascinating. We won't go into that right now. So a lot of new business owners, when they get into something and they're working with wholesalers, they will instantly just think, oh, the first quoted price, that's the price on the shelf, that's what I pay. And that's not how it works once you get into distribution. Distribution requires negotiation for you to actually get a good deal. And it requires someone that actually understands the market. Getting into the negotiation, going, hey, I have another company that's offering me this. What can you offer me? Hey, can we talk about maybe some marketing things where I'll put ads for your product in my product and you'll give me a better deal on this, or are there other ways that we can do this? Can I introduce you? If I introduce you to another friend of mine, can I get a discount for giving giving you their business as well? Like, there's so many different ways that you can negotiate better terms. I am assuming DMLayer did none of these because, again, that takes much more business acumen than anything that he's shown right now. So yeah, the idea of all manufacturers are in China, complete bold-faced lie. That is, again, it's the same excuse of, well, all salesmen lie. I'm just too truthful to be a salesman. It's not how it works. The next one, he invested $50,000 before launch. And this is the one that drove me nuts. Because there's another article that's called "How Much Money Does a First-Time Crowdfunder Spend Before Launching?" where Stonemaier Games goes through, hey, this is how much money you're going to need to spend in order to launch a board game Kickstarter. Again, this is specifically for board games. For anything else, it's going to be different. I'm not going to go through their entire thing. But the number that they come up with is $4,600. The number that the DMLayer claims he paid was $50,000. He paid 10 times the recommended. And one of the things that they mention here, they specifically mention marketing. And they talk about marketing, set aside about $1,000 for social media ads geared towards attracting pre-launch signups. This is where my actual marketing degree comes in. The vast majority of people do not understand how marketing works. What they assume is, hey, if I go to Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or Etsy, I actually had a friend of mine that actually paid for Etsy ads, and they were a complete waste of money. And I pay the money. That means that that's marketing. That's not marketing. That's a paid scam for people that don't understand how marketing works. Let me tell you how actual marketing works. The way that marketing works is you pick a particular market that you want to market your product to. And when I say a particular market, I mean a particular kind of person that you want to target. And then you create a marketing strategy around finding a way first to appeal to that particular person or group of people. Second, how to ensure that your ads get in front of that particular group. You can have the greatest marketing, you can have the greatest commercial or greatest print ad in the world. And if it doesn't get in front of your target market, it is a complete waste of money. When you pay, especially like low levels of stuff, when you just click on one of these things and go, yeah, I'd like to buy ads, you are effectively wasting your money because you can't target the ads to the market that you want. Now, when you get into high-level stuff, like Google ad buys from like Walmart and things like that, they can, because Google tracks everything that you do. And so does Meta, and so does Twitter. They all have... these algorithms that everyone hates? Well, one of the reasons the algorithm exists is because it allows them to be able to specifically target groups based on the actions that they take while on and sometimes off the platform. So when you're spending $100,000, $200,000, $1 million on an ad buy, part of that fee, you can tell whatever company you're going with, I specifically want to target this particular demographic. And they can do that. When you're just clicking the buy ads button, it is a random splattering, meaning the majority of your ad is going to be going in front of people that don't want your product, that are not part of it. Now, the second half, creating an ad that actually appeals to that requires you researching your target market. Another thing that the DMLayer just doesn't do. He talks about basically the people that are already interested in his products. That is his target market. That's a really bad target market. You don't target your own customers for marketing that much. You do still market to your own customers. That's one of the reasons why when you go into most retail stores, I actually don't know if they do this anymore because I haven't gone shopping in close to a decade. But it used to be anytime you would go in, they would ask for your email address, and that was so that they could market to you in particular. Another thing that people always got confused about is a lot of stores that ask for zip codes. That's not actually to market to you. That's actually to give to their marketing company so that they can figure out where their customers come from. But it's not actually linked to you personally. It's simply telling them, okay, where do our customers come from? If this is where our customers are coming from, this is where we need to target our current customer marketing. But that's not the only marketing any company does. You also want to find new customers, because if the only thing that you ever market to are the customers that are already buying your products, those customers will get smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. They will never get bigger. So you always have to be looking outside your customer base, and that's where targeted marketing comes from. You choose a market that you want to target, a group of individuals, then you start thinking, okay, what motivates these people the most? Is it pretty girls? Is it big explosions? Is it words like turbo, stealth? And that involves a lot of times paying for market research or doing market research yourself. Paying for market research is easier, but incredibly expensive. Doing the market research yourself is significantly more difficult. And if you do it poorly, your market research will actually tell you the wrong things. None of these things were done, as far as I can tell, by the DM Layer. I'm assuming he just found various websites, clicked, hey, I'm going to do this, and then put out untargeted ads, which are effectively a waste of your money. I also have no idea what he actually did as far as creating his ads, because again, I know a lot of people that will create quote unquote ads that aren't actually ads because they don't have something that's really, really simple. They won't have what's called a call to action. The most important part of any advertisement campaign is what's called the call to action, which is what changes the person from knowing about it to buying it. If there's no call to action, then people will just remember that it exists, which is still good. I've mentioned this many, many times before. 90% of your marketing budget should go to what's called product recognition, which is just getting people to know that your product exists. But the only time product recognition translates into sales is if they're already planning on buying a product similar to yours, and now that they know yours exists, they choose yours. You still have to have a call to action, and I've seen a lot of YouTubers and Etsy shop owners and things like that that don't understand how to create a good call to action, and so they'll just put up really cool looking ads that don't actually help them get any sales because there's no call to action. So I don't know exactly what he did as far as his marketing is concerned. But if I had to guess, I'm also going to assume that his marketing was not particularly great because, again, of all the stuff he said in here, these are all like super big red flags in marketing in general of this person doesn't know what they're talking about. So yeah, $50,000 invested is insane. And when we look at these things like nice prototypes, he talks about having to get prototypes made. That's a really essential part of doing something like this is you need to have a prototype. So first of all, you can create your video because the video is really, really important in a Kickstarter. It will definitely help you get more backers. And if it looks really cheaply done, then no one's going to do it. And in addition to that, you also need to have prototypes to be able to send out to playtesters and also to reviewers or basically as marketing things. They specifically say nice prototypes and shipping for prototype reviewers. $600 should cover around 5 to 6 high-quality prototypes to send to reviewers before the project, though it may be lower depending on the components. So you should spend about $600 to create 5 or 6 reviewers. And that's just for the reviewers. to send them off to people to review it, because reviews are marketing. And so you send them off, and then you hope that they make a good review. And part of sending these off is you have to have advertising material built into the review, saying, "Hey, we would love for you to look at our game. We're launching a Kickstarter on this date at this time. This is the link to it. This is what it is. This is a link to the video for it." All of those things are essential because, again, those are the call to action. If you're just sending out random boxes and just going, "Hey, we're starting a Kickstarter soon. Look for dungeon drifters," you're going to run into problems. Now, is this what he did? I have absolutely no idea. It's possible that he might have understood that process. It's possible he didn't. I don't know. But I'm saying, bare minimum, he spent a lot more money on it than he should have. They talk about graphic design, sample art for it, all the different money. The fun part that I found interesting in this, again, the total that Stone Mayor Games talks about is $4,600. Sample art, they recommend spending about $2,000, and graphic design about $1,000. So of the $4,600, $3,000 of it, nearly 60% of it, is entirely in art and graphic design, which is a good thing to know when you're creating a board game, because a lot of the work that you are going to put into the board game has nothing to do with that. It's creating the rules, playtesting, all that stuff. That's what a lot of game designers think about. And then they think about the artwork later. Well, in this, 60% of your pre-launch budget is just art stuff. You need to understand, if you're doing something like this, your art budget is probably going to be bigger than a lot of people expect. And so understanding that, understanding how much of your pre-launch budget is going to go to art is important. Now, is it possible that he just went like crazy with the artwork, and that's where the majority of the $50,000 went? We're still looking at an order of magnitude larger than he should have been putting out. And that goes back to the idea, in business we call it over leveraging. Something that a lot of people don't realize about business in general. I need a drink. Something a lot of people don't understand about businesses in general is, if your business isn't in debt, you're doing something wrong. And what I mean by that is, the way that businesses operate is they operate in a state of perpetual debt, because as soon as they pay off their debts, they will re-leverage their business assets in order to reinvest that in the business. To give you a good example, let's say you're starting up a printing company, and the first thing that you buy is a really big, high quality laser printer, and then you also get a really big, high quality inkjet printer. Both of them run you about $25,000 a piece. So your initial investment in the business is $50,000, and then you spend other money on desks and computers and stuff like that. So let's say your startup costs $100,000 once you get everything involved. Well, once you start making profit and you pay off the loan, the initial business loan that you got on like those printers and that, first of all, they've devalued. There's an actual formula you use to figure out how much they devalue. But they still have some value in them. And so what you'll do is you will go back to that bank and ask for another loan for a different purpose. Well, the last time we leveraged the business itself as the loan. Well, now the business is running really well. So we're going to leverage the business again in order to do this. We're going to upgrade. We're gonna add 2 new printers and hire a bunch more people. So we need that. Businesses act in a perpetual state of debt, and if you aren't leveraging your assets correctly, then you're running your business poorly. Over leveraging is what happens when a business owner doesn't quite understand how to leverage their assets correctly, and they will over leverage them. Well, they will go, well, I want to get a $50,000 loan for this particular project, but the project itself is not going to make you $50,000. You've come up with a convoluted way where it could make that, but the actual reality of it is you might make 10 grand off it. So now you're 40 grand in the hole. And so you have to go and try and leverage more to be able to make up that thing. And what happens, the reason that businesses go under is because, again, they're in a constant state of debt. And as long as they're paying that debt, the banks are generally, and the creditors in general, are generally happy to watch them work. But as soon as it gets to the point where the assets for the company are no longer going to cover their liabilities, their creditors will immediately come in and say, hey, we don't think you are going to be able to pay this off, so we want you to pay it right now. That's called foreclosing. And when that happens, that's when businesses go under. When, devaluation or bad business decisions will make it so that they can no longer cover their debt, and then all of their debt people come in. And that's why, if you guys remember, quite a few years ago, Matt Pat did this whole thing where the company that he worked for basically went bankrupt. The multi-channel network that he was a part of. And he made this impassioned plea saying, hey, it's not fair that these big companies get their money before us. That's my money. No, it isn't. You gave it to this company and then told them, you're allowed to take my money and then pay me. And then when the company was not able to cover their debts, the people that got to collect on the debt first were the ones that had paid more money in order to do that. I can't remember the term right now because, again, Swiss cheese brain. But that's a real thing. There are going to be different levels of credit that you have. And the high levels, these businesses pay extra money and give you extra better deals in order to be able to say, well, if things go poorly and you're not able to cover all of your debt, I am going to be able to take mine first. So at least my money is safe. The rest of the people kind of get fucked over. But my money is safe. So that's effectively what the DM layer did here. He over-leveraged his business by spending significantly more money than he should have. And there are a lot of better ways that he could have spent that money. Now, he never tells us specifically, or at least not in the things that I watched. Again, it's a 42-minute long video, and I was not going to listen to him just blatantly misinform people for that long. But there's a very good chance that a lot of the problems were just bad marketing decisions because, again, marketing is expensive. And it's very, very easy to spend $50,000 in marketing without actually realizing that you've just pissed your money away. And, again, I've seen this happen over and over and over again. So, yeah, the $50,000 that he keeps claiming is why he had to cancel this. That was because he made bad decisions. Really, really, really bad decisions. That is entirely on him. It has nothing to do with anything else. If he hadn't made those bad decisions, this probably could have been a success. Moving on. The next thing he talks about, minimum orders. This is another thing that I actually learned about as part of my project management degree. Because project management, a lot of people don't understand what the idea of project management is. Project management is not, I am the manager of a project. No, it's actually a lot of math. Like half of my project management courses were doing things like figuring out what the minimum batch number we need before we switch over to this, finding the critical path in this particular manufacturing problem. Like a lot of project management is involved in manufacturing. And so that aspect, I actually learned a lot about manufacturing just in general. So minimum orders. Minimum orders are a thing because in a factory, when you're making a product. To switch to a different product, you actually have to change the physical machines themselves. Sometimes you have to move machines around, you have to change dies and things like that. All of that stuff costs money. Anytime a machine is not running, it's costing the business money. And so there are actual equations that you can use to figure out when it is economically viable for your company to start a new batch. So minimum order numbers are based on that idea. It's if I have to change, 3 machines, which each one of those machines is going to cost me, an hour of production. Well, I'm going to lose this much in that amount of time. So in order for this to be justifiable, I have to make significantly more than the money I just lost because I can't produce anything because I have to change all my machines to print the new thing or to create the new thing that you need. So that's where minimum orders come from. And a lot of times, depending on what you're making, if you're doing something like t-shirts, depending on the company you're going through, I've seen minimum orders be as low as like 100 or like 150, 200. When you start dealing with more mass market stuff, like we're dealing with like board games, generally your minimum orders are going to be in the thousands. According to the DM Layer, his minimum order was 1,000. And this is where he runs into another issue, because he sits there and goes, well, if I do all of this and I only need 300 of this and or 500 of this and like 350 of this, but my minimum order is 1,000. That means that I have 500 extra base games and math 650. Yeah, that's the right number. 650 extra the expansions. Like I that's just extra money that I'm throwing away. No, that's not how this works. That is additional money, and this is where I kind of lost it, because effectively what he was saying here is, anything I don't sell as part of the Kickstarter is wasted. And that's not how Kickstarter works. If you are kickstarting something and the only time you sell any of it is to the Kickstarter backers, you have done it incorrectly. Now, I don't know, because again, he's run a bunch of other Kickstarter projects. I think this is either his 4th or his 5th. So I don't know if this is how it's worked with his other ones, and he just didn't over leverage himself enough to get screwed over, or it's the fact that over leveraging yourself on a board game is significantly more expensive than over leveraging yourself on a book. So that might be factoring in here too. Again, not understanding the market before you're getting involved in it. But the idea of anything extra that I have is just a waste of money is such, for lack of a better term, it's such a stupid premise. Absolutely moronically stupid. He's selling these games to the Kickstarters at $80 a pop for the base, and what was it, like 130 for base plus expansion? Let me look here because I've got the numbers up. Yeah, $80 a pop for the base game, $150 a pop if you get the base game plus the expansion, and that's the Kickstarter price. Generally, that means that when it goes to mass market, it's going to be more expensive. But as we saw before when we were talking about the Stone Mayer Games stuff, we were talking about the funding. Distributors generally get to pay 60% of the MSRP, manufacturer's suggested retail price. So to use easy numbers. I don't know if this is the numbers that he would have used, but I'm going to use easy numbers. We will say that the base game itself is $100. Base game plus expansion is $150. And he can sell the expansion on its own for, let's say, $70, so that there is an incentive to buy the base plus expansion. That means all of the additional products is inventory that you can sell to recoup the rest of your losses. That's how manufacturing works. That's how your initial startup cost works. It's just enough for you to get the first batch out, but you're supposed to be selling things after that. Whether you have your own proprietary website that you're selling it on, which tends to be the highest profit margin, but also the most cost incurred by you, or you're going through distributors, calling up friendly local game stores and going, hey, I kickstarted this product. We made this much money. We'd love to have it show up in your game store. How many units would you like? It requires a lot of work. And again, you're going to be selling it lower than you would there. But again, you can make up for it in volume and things like that. He just completely ignores the idea that the Kickstarter backers are not your only customers. And I think, again, this is my assumption, I think he thinks that's how Kickstarter works. Is this idea of Kickstarter is just a sales platform, not a startup platform. And that, again, it's a complete misunderstanding of how business works. Kickstarter is meant to help you get the startup capital that you need to start your project. But if the only thing that you do is sell to the people that bought it through Kickstarter, you have royally fucked up. Because once the Kickstarter is a success and once everything is over, you should be able to leverage that success to continue selling it. If the only time you make sales on any of your products is when it's during the Kickstarter, you have massively fucked up. You have completely misunderstood how Kickstarter works, how businesses work, and you are sitting on literally shit tons of profit that you simply don't understand how it works. Minimum orders are a thing, and the way it goes is, let's say you get just over the minimum order. Well, they're not going to do, let's say minimum order is 1,000 and you need to be able to sell 1,022. Well, they're not going to just print you 22 extra ones. They will generally, after the minimum order, they will generally have batch sizes where they can go, well, you can do 1,000, and the next step up is 1,250 or 1,500 or something like that. So you are never going to get the exact number that you sold in your Kickstarter. You are always going to have additional copies. And if you're doing it correctly, you should be able to leverage the profit you made from your Kickstarter to get enough inventory to continue selling until it goes through the entire kind of sales process where people just aren't buying it anymore for whatever reason. Unless your game is like Monopoly or Risk, eventually people will stop buying your game. You will saturate the market, and either you have to create an expansion to the game or you have to create a new version of the game for people to buy again. It's the same thing with editions for tabletop RPGs. Eventually, it will no longer be viable for you to release expansions because you've saturated the market, and the number of people that are willing to buy the next expansion will not be large enough to cover the cost of creating that expansion. So you create version 2, second edition of your tabletop. And that means all the people that previously invested are now able to invest again because it's a new product, but you already have a customer base. Yeah, like I said, this is not me specifically calling out the DM layer, though I do name him because I have to. But this is more about the idea of, if you want to run a business, this is how it works. And bitching and moaning about how unfair it is just shows that you don't know what you're doing. You need to get out of here, especially if you have employees or anything, because you're going to tank your business, or you're going to screw over your employees really, really bad. And for everyone else that's thinking about getting into board game manufacturing, go to Stone Mayer Games. There's so many resources. And then after that, invest some time in learning how businesses work. There's tons of free information on the internet that you can get. If you want to go the expensive route, you can go and get a degree in business. I'm going to tell you right now, 50 to 70% of the shit that you learn in an undergrad business degree is mostly worthless. It's made up by people that have never actually worked in a business, but have studied it a lot And so in theory, it sounds good, and in practice, it's pure bullshit. But you can go that route. And again, despite the fact that 70% of the stuff I learned in business school, I could directly contradict because I had nearly a decade of experience in business management already. The other 30% was invaluable. Most of the marketing stuff that I learned was invaluable. The majority of the project management stuff I learned was invaluable because, again, it was mostly math. And it didn't have anything to do with managing a company. It had everything to do with, okay, this is how you figure out critical path, and this is how you figure out batch numbers, and all that stuff that you really can't fuck up. So you can go that route. There's a bunch of different places you can find books. You can talk to industry insiders and see how much information you can get. You can pay a company to see if they will let you sit in on a product launch or something like that to see how much information you can get that way. Like, there's a lot of different ways, but you really need to learn how business works and not just make excuses and go, well, this is how it works. It's not all salesmen lie. Nope. It's literally, it's, oh, I can't remember the actual number. And again, this is a decade ago, but it's somewhere is like 3 to 5% of quote unquote dishonest salesmen, or even less than that. It might have been like 1-2%. Where salesmen are lying. And the reason why is when a salesman lies, the customer comes back and gets mad at them. And there's not a whole lot that they can do about that. They just have to kind of take their medicine. And in order to be able to get around that, you have to be extremely good at manipulating people. And it's just not a skill that, and I'm not talking about, oh, like, he's really good. I'm talking about like supervillain levels of manipulation, something that the vast majority of the population simply don't have the ability to do. That's the only way you can really thrive as a dishonest salesman. Most salesmen are honest to a fault because they know if they lie, not only can they lose their job, they can get sued and other things like that. Like, it's real bad. And then there's the whole ethics thing. Let's ignore ethics. So yeah, interested to hear what you guys think. Like I said, when I first heard about this, it instantly, this has set me off because I heard a lot of excuses that I'd heard before. I started doing my research and realized that some of the things I was thinking might not have been 100% accurate. But for the most part, I thought it still wasn't a great thing. And then I actually heard his explanation and realized, no, he's talking out of his ass and trying to justify him just making really, really bad business decisions that theoretically might tank his entire business. And that's the thing about running a business is when you fuck up, it's not like, oopsie, the company's going to lose a little bit of money. It's, oh, I no longer have not just a job, I no longer have a business, and everyone that worked for me is now out of a job, out of healthcare, out of whatever else I provided for them. Running a business is a huge responsibility, and there are certain people that shouldn't get into running a business because they're not ready for that level of responsibility, or they're simply unwilling to treat it with the responsibility that it deserves. So yeah, what do you guys think? Do you think I'm being overly harsh here? Would you like to hear more about the critical path? Because that's a fun topic to talk about. Or like I said, planogram design and the psychology behind it, or customer pathing through your stores. Those are all things that I had to learn in business school that were actually useful. So anyway, let me know in the comments down below. Otherwise, again, it's all for me today. I will see you guys next time. All right? Bye-bye.